In 2003, David Duke, the man who almost became Louisiana's governor, stood in a federal courthouse in New Orleans. His charge? Swindling his own followers out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. This was no ordinary con. This was a betrayal of an ideology he had championed. How did Duke, the poster child of America's white supremacist movement, become its most infamous defector? The Ku Klux Klan is a name that sends shivers down the spine, evoking images of hooded figures and burning crosses. Founded in the ashes of the Civil War, the notorious KKK has been a dark stain on American history, a group that has perpetuated hate, violence, and discrimination. But what drives someone to such extreme hatred? And what happens to those who rise to prominence within such a hate-filled organization? With these questions in mind, let's explore the fates of some of the most notorious figures in the history of the Ku Klux Klan. Harry Rogers. Harry Rogers, a self-proclaimed leader of the KKK in Virginia, made headlines when he drove his truck into a crowd of protesters in June 2020. Rogers was convicted on multiple counts, including hate crimes, and was sentenced to 6 years in prison. The incident occurred during a Black Lives Matter protest, and Rogers was found to have been motivated by racial hatred. His actions were not only condemned by the public, but also led to legal repercussions that he couldn't escape. You see, Rogers was no stranger to hate groups. He was deeply involved in the KKK, an organization notorious for its racist ideology. His actions on that fateful day, thus, were not an isolated incident, but a manifestation of years of indoctrination. Interestingly, Rogers claimed that he was a ranking member of the KKK, which, if true, makes his downfall even more significant. His conviction set a precedent in Virginia, especially since it involved the application of hate crime laws, which are often difficult to enforce. The case against Rogers was strengthened by his own social media posts, where he openly expressed his racist views. Prosecutors used these posts as evidence to establish the hate crime charges against him. The irony is that Rogers, who sought to instill fear and assert the twisted notion of white supremacy, ended up strengthening the resolve of the community he targeted. His conviction was a message to like-minded individuals that hate has no place in society and will not go unpunished. Nathan Bedford Forrest. Nathan Bedford Forrest, born on July 13, 1821, in Chapel Hill, Tennessee, was a man of many contradictions. He was self-taught, having grown up in a poor family with no formal education. However, his life took a significant turn when the Civil War broke out. Forrest enlisted as a private in the Tennessee Mounted Rifles and quickly rose through the ranks, eventually becoming a lieutenant colonel. Forrest's military career was not without controversy. He was implicated in the Battle of Fort Pillow, where nearly 300 surrendering black soldiers were killed. The incident remains a subject of debate among historians, with some arguing that the killings were premeditated, while others believe they occurred in the heat of battle. Regardless, the event cast a long shadow over Forrest's legacy. After the Civil War, Forrest returned to Memphis, Tennessee, and entered the business world. He became a lumber merchant and planter, and even served as the president of the Selma, Marion, and Memphis Railroad. However, his association with the Ku Klux Klan, a secret society formed in the aftermath of the Civil War, became another dark chapter in his life. Forrest was allegedly the first Grand Wizard of the Klan, although he later denied any involvement when testifying before a joint congressional committee in 1871. Financial troubles plagued Forrest in his later years. His railroad company failed in 1874, forcing him to sell off many of his assets. He spent his remaining years overseeing a prison camp near Memphis and living with his wife in a log cabin salvaged from his plantation. Forrest died on October 29, 1877, reportedly from complications of diabetes. He is remembered by some as a hero of Southern causes and has been memorialized in statues and other monuments throughout the region. However, his association with the Fort Pillow massacre and the Ku Klux Klan make him a deeply polarizing figure. In December 2017, a statue of Forrest on horseback was removed from a park in Memphis, Tennessee, amid a heated battle over whether Confederate monuments belonged in public places. Samuel Bowers. At number 3 is Samuel Holloway Bowers Jr., born on August 6, 1924, in New Orleans. Unlike other notorious gangsters, Sam was the product of an educated and affluent family. One of his grandfathers was a 4-term congressman from Mississippi, and the other was a Southern planter. Despite this privileged background, Bowers chose a path that led him to become one of the most notorious figures in the history of American hate groups. Bowers co-founded the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan and became its first imperial wizard. This organization organization was an offshoot of the Mississippi Original Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, where Bowers had previously served as a Grand Dragon. The White Knights were known for their unhesitating willingness to use violence, and under Bowers' leadership, the group grew in strength and notoriety. The FBI attributed 9 murders and 300 beatings, burnings, and bombings to Bowers and his organization. One of the most infamous crimes committed under Bowers' leadership was the 1966 firebombing of the home of Vernon F. Dahmer Sr., a Mississippi shopkeeper who had allowed fellow black citizens to pay their poll taxes and register to vote in his store. Bowers sent 2 carloads of Klansmen armed with gasoline, white hoods, and shotguns to Dahmer's house. The attack resulted in Dahmer's death, but not before he held off the attackers long enough for his family to escape. Bowers was brought to trial 5 times for the Dahmer killing. The first 4 trials ended in hung juries, but in 1998, he was finally convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Before this, he had served 6 years in federal prison for the killings of civil rights workers Andrew Goodman, Michael H. Schwerner, and James Earl Chaney in 1964. He never apologized or asked for forgiveness for his actions, and he died in a prison hospital in Parchman, Mississippi on November 5, 2006, from a heart attack at the age of 82. David Duke. Next is David Ernest Duke, the man we discussed at the very start of this video. Born on July 1, 1950, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, David's father, David H. Duke, was an engineer for Shell Oil, and his mother was Alice Maxine Crick. The family lived in the Netherlands for a while before settling in Louisiana. Duke's early life was influenced by William Pierce, a white supremacist and leader of the National Alliance, whom he met as a teenager. Duke's journey into the world of white supremacy began when he joined the Ku Klux Klan at the age of 17. He later enrolled at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, where he formed a white student group called the White Youth Alliance. Duke gained notoriety for organizing parties to celebrate Adolf Hitler's birth anniversary, and even appeared at Tulane University in a Nazi uniform to protest a visit by William Kunstler. In 1974, Duke married Chloe Hardin, whom he met while working in the White Youth Alliance. They had 2 daughters, Erica and Kristen, before divorcing in 1984. Duke's personal life has been marked by a penchant for gambling and a reputation as a womanizer. Duke founded the Louisiana-based Knights of the Ku Klux Klan and became its Grand Wizard. He introduced reforms like business suits, non-violence, and equal membership for women and Catholics. However, after facing accusations of using Klan funds for personal use and amid violent incidents, he left the Klan. He then formed the National Association for the Advancement of White People, aiming to end discrimination against white individuals. Duke began his political career as a Democrat, but later switched to the Republican Party. He has contested various elections, including runs for the Louisiana State Senate, the governorship of Louisiana, and even the Republican Party's presidential candidate nomination. After spending 3 years overseas advocating for white survival, Duke found himself in legal hot water. He was accused of misleading his supporters by claiming he was in financial difficulty, only to misuse the funds they sent him between 1993 and 1999. The indictment against him revealed that he had filed a false tax return for the year 1998, claiming an income of only $18,831 when, in reality, he had made more than $65,000. The case took a dramatic turn when Duke returned to Louisiana from abroad to negotiate with federal prosecutors. He pleaded guilty to mail fraud and filing a false tax return. This plea came with severe repercussions. Not only could he be sentenced to up to 15 months in prison and fined $10,000, but the felony charges also disqualified him from running for public office ever again. After his release, however, he continued to be active, organizing meetings and even receiving a doctoral degree from a Ukrainian university. In recent years, Duke has been expelled from Italy and banned from entering 26 other countries. Despite the numerous legal and social barriers, Duke remains a figure who continues to provoke and polarize, leaving us to wonder, can society ever fully understand or deal with such deeply ingrained prejudices? Henry Francis Hayes. Last but not least is Henry Francis Hayes, who was born into a world of racial hatred, a legacy passed down from his father, a high-ranking official in the Ku Klux Klan. Hayes grew up in Alabama, a state with a long history of racial segregation and violence. His father was an exalted Cyclops, controlling the Klan's operations in southern Alabama, and it was under this influence that Hayes unwillingly joined the United Klans of America. In 1981, Hayes and another Klan member, James Tiger Knowles, committed a heinous crime that would eventually lead to Hayes' downfall. They abducted Michael Donald, a 19-year-old African-American man, at random from a street in Mobile, Alabama. Donald was beaten, cut, and strangled before his body was hung from a tree. The crime was intended to show the Klan's strength in Alabama, especially after a jury had deadlocked in the trial of a black man charged with killing a white police officer. The murder had the opposite effect of what the Klan had hoped for. Instead of emboldening racists, it led to the financial ruin of the United Klans of America. In 1987, the Klan was hit with a $7 million wrongful death verdict in a case brought by Donald's mother, Beulah May Donald. The Klan had to sign over its Tuscaloosa building to her, which she later sold for about $52,000 and used to buy a house. Hayes was convicted for his role in the murder and was sentenced to death. His execution in 1997 was a landmark moment, as it was Alabama's first execution for a white-on-black crime since 1913. Hayes was 42 years old at the time of his death, and his execution marked the end of a life steeped in racial hatred and violence. Governor Forbes James Jr. had refused to grant Hayes clemency, sealing his fate.